Welcome to a special edition of the Steelers Breakdown podcast. He's the Penn Live Steelers beat reporter, Nick Farabaugh, and I'm John Luciew. And yes, the pick is in from your Pittsburgh Steelers. They are sticking to the trenches and building with the big guys. And boy, is Oregon's defensive lineman, Derrick Harmon, a whopper. And he has a really heart-tugging personal story about his hospitalized mother, and I'll tell you, that gets me right here. My own mother had a lot of health problems, and she died way too young at 57, so I am right there with Derrick, and just an unbelievable situation there. And the other guy who absolutely loves this pick is Cam Hayward. The gray beard now has a protege on the line, and Hayward is the quintessential traditional Steeler. Of all the current players, he embodies the Pittsburgh legacy, and his opportunity to take Harmon under his wing and maybe pass that tradition and legacy to the next generation. Who could be against that? Okay. I mean, that all sets up beautifully. Now, the one thing I'm going to get into Nick with is I was an economics minor at Penn State. And the one thing I always remember is that for every choice you make, the biggest cost, the opportunity cost, the price you pay is all the other options that you forgo. And there were a lot of options available to the Steelers at pick 21. My question is, 3 years from now, will all the Yinzers be crying into their icy light, looking at some of the players that the Steelers didn't take? The QB, Shedeur Sanders, of course, lots of discussion there. Jackson Dart. Or how about the wide receiver that went a pick later to Green Bay from Texas, Golden? So, Nick, what do you think of, are we going to be just so happy with Harmon that none of this is going to matter? Or are some people going to look at some of these other players that went a few picks later and say, what coulda, shoulda, woulda been?
Listen, I think Derrick Harmon's a really good player. He's always been my top-rated defensive tackle for them. That was realistic. Mason Graham, of course, not really that much realistic there. But I love Derrick Harmon, man. I mean, he's got a hot motor. He's an instant spark plug as a run defender. I love that for them. Remember the decree that we were talking about? Remember I was in Mobile and we were talking after Art Rooney talked, and he said, we got to fix the lines, the run defense. And then you remember back to the thrashing that they experienced in Baltimore. This is exactly correlated to that. Make no mistake about it. This is the reaction to that game. This is the reaction to what happens when you get stomped out twice on the road in Baltimore and Derrick Henry and company run for 300 yards on you twice. This is what happens. And so Harmon's going to be a great instant run defense boost. I think that's a big thing. But you don't draft a defensive lineman in the first round just for run defense, right? You draft that guy. He's versatile and can be a pass rusher on top of that. So you look at Harmon, led the college football world last year in pressures, second in pass rush win rate, second in pressure rate, 5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. The counting stats, the advanced stats, they're all there. He was one of the best pass rushers in the country last year, on top of being a polished run defender. He's a really good athlete. If you look at his relative athletic score, he's over a 9. The Steelers love that under Omar Khan and Andy Weidel. They draft uber athletic players, and he's no exception to that rule. So Derrick Harmon fits that very well. He can play 5-3. You can even maybe play him out to 7 at some points, but he'll sit in that 5-2 eye pocket. So he'll be the base end opposite of Cam Hayward in base. And Keanu Benton will then be the nose still. What will happen in sub packages is, my guess, Cam Hayward obviously is going to be your stagnant, stable guy, right? He's your superstar. But for pass rush certain matchups, I think they're going to go to Keanu Benton. And then for run defense certain matchups, they will go to Derrick Harmon. So you can really work through both of those guys and kind of decide how you want to split that division of labor up. And then, of course, sometimes you'll have Harmon and Benton on the field at the same time. That's your future duo, and I think it's a really good one. I really like Keanu Benton. I really like Derrick Harmon. I think the Steelers fans are going to be quite happy with Derrick Harmon. This is a very, it's a Steelers pick, but a very un-Steelersy pick in the same vein. The reasons I said he's a Steelers pick right there, here's why he's not a Steelers pick. Because usually when they draft athletes, they draft raw, tapped upside. The last 2 years with Fautanu and Harmon, they've gone for more polished, high-character players. It's a little bit of an interesting difference. Because remember, 2023, Roger Jones, when we talked about him, wow, the tools are great, but he's so raw, right? That was the thing with Broderick Jones. I think, when you look at Devin Bush, Terrell Edmonds, Chase Claypool, all of those guys, you can talk about physical tools, and that's how they've drafted. This guy's a high floor prospect, but he's got upside. He's the type of player the Steelers typically have not taken. They've taken the higher swings on rawer players, and this time they actually take the swing on a really polished player that's going to be an instant spark plug to your team. And so, listen, I understand people saying they wanted a quarterback. I get it. Look at the quarterback room. It makes sense. But on top of that, the Steelers were not going to take a quarterback they didn't love. They like Shedeur Sanders. They don't love Shedeur Sanders. And that's ultimately what this came down to. Because when you look at Shedeur Sanders, we've talked about his issues, right? He's a linear thrower, not a rotational thrower. The arm is just average. He's got some things to work on in his game. And he's not a ceiling raiser. The Steelers want to draft a quarterback they love and they think that they can win a Super Bowl with. There just wasn't that conviction throughout the entire organization about him. As for Golden, I think that goes back to George Pickens directly, and that they're not really expecting to move on from him necessarily. So that's something to look at there. I think Matthew Golden's a stud. That would have been a fine pick to me, but I think that goes directly back to that. Dart, I just don't think they had in the same tier as these guys. They were not they were not a team that was fans of Dart. They were never really considering him. From what I was hearing in the first round, it was more Sanders than Dart. So, you talk about those guys, and certainly there's arguments for them. But I really do think we are going to look at a guy like Derrick Harmon and say, this was a good pick. He's a stalwart for you. In fact, John, I had an NFL scout at the NFL Combine to me compare Derrick Harmon to Stephon Tuitt. That's who was his comparison. I know people have thrown around the next Cam Hayward. I think he's more in the Tuitt range. Tuitt coming out of Notre Dame was a stout run defender that could win as a pass rusher but struggled to finish. You look at Derrick Harmon's tape, there's a lot of clean wins on that tape. He didn't finish all the wins. And that's the big thing as a pass rusher. He's just going to have to finish a little better. But that's very teachable. It's a very teachable trait. And so the Steelers got a really good player here in Derrick Harmon, who I think has upside to be that Stephon Tuitt type. And I really like this pick. I think Steelers fans are going to like this pick. The big question, of course, John, is the medicals. That's going to be the big one this year. From what I've heard, Derrick Harmon at the Combine had an MRI that revealed a partially torn rotator cuff and a torn labrum in his shoulder. He played through that, and he never felt much pain while playing through it, from what I've heard. He told teams that it never truly bothered him much. The rotator cuff will heal probably by the start of the season, so that probably will be fine. The labrum will probably need surgery at some point. At some point in his career, he dislocated his shoulder, and that caused that injury. But plenty of players right now that are still playing at a very high level are playing with labrum injuries. George Kittle's, I think, played with a torn labrum for about 5 years now. And so this is a very common injury to play through. He can get surgery next offseason to fix that. But he will play this year. He'll be ready for training camp, everything like that. Some teams weren't as comfortable with it and took him off their board. The Steelers were not one of those teams. And from what I was hearing, if the Steelers didn't take him at 21, Derrick Harmon was going to be the Los Angeles Chargers' pick at 22. So there's teams in the same range as the Steelers that have Derrick Harmon on their board, despite medical questions. I think there's a few teams above them, teams like the Bengals that took him off the board because of that shoulder injury. But the Steelers have not had problems taking guys with medical questions. And so that's going to be the big question, I think, with Harmon. But from what I'm hearing, this is not expected, at least in the Steelers organization, this is not expected to be a significant hurdle for them.
Information there, Nick. And I got to ask you, who is the Steelers scout covering Oregon? Because the last two drafts, the Steelers have gone duck hunting at the top of this draft. So, somebody is out there mining some gold for the black and gold. What's the story on this newfound Oregon connection for the Steelers?
Yeah, so, Oregon and Washington in back-to-back years, West Coast, huh? They didn't take a West Coast guy, even at all generally. I think before that, it was guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, but it was almost always USC. But Washington, the connection there is Mark Bruner. And really in Oregon too. It's Mark Bruner, who is their Pacific Northwest, West Coast area scout. So he's really kind of their guy out there. Now they have some other connections. Mark Sadowski, their director of player scouting, has really good West Coast connections. There's a former Steelers cornerback, D. Iwuma, who is partially out there in the West Coast, Southwest area as well. So they have a few connections here running through Oregon and Washington. That's that Pacific Northwest area for them. It is lush with recruiting. because a lot of these players from the Midwest, a lot of these top California players, even these top Florida players are now heading out there. And because the Big Ten is now all national, right? And because you have USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon in the Big Ten now, the Steelers are able to send their scouts to Penn State, Columbus, Purdue, Northwestern, Michigan, Michigan State, and get a look at these guys and talk to their sources there a lot easier than they were previously. And that's become a little bit of a new age thing for the Steelers, as they can get a lot better feel on the West Coast kind of prospects because of this. And so that is something that has really actually seeped into this organization in recent years. They have gone from a team that would only draft you if you were west of the Mississippi to a team that's going to draft you wherever you are. The Steelers just have the litany of information, and they feel more comfortable having that when they are able to go see you 5 times in a year because you play in the Big Ten versus once maybe when they fly out to California to go see you play at Stanford, right? So that's the thing. Now the fact that you have all these teams, Arizona, Arizona State, et cetera, in the Big 12, they'll come closer, right? They'll come to Morgantown sometimes, or you can go to Texas and see them. The fact that in the ACC now you have Cal and Stanford, Cal and Stanford ever have a first-round prospect. The Steelers are going to be able to see them because of the ACC footprint now. So it's just a different world. And that, in a lot of places, really helps the Steelers dig more into the pipelines, establish more connections. And so they are going to be a team that now looks at West Coast players. They might not go to their pro days because Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan were not at Oregon this year. And remember, that was the big knock on Derrick Harmon. It was like, oh, they didn't go to his pro day. Well, they brought him in for a 30 visit. They met with him formally at the Combine, and they have all these sources in the Pacific Northwest that they can talk to, and they feel comfortable with that to take Derrick Harmon. So keep an eye on that in the future. I think West Coast guys are going to become a little more frequent, potentially even more in this draft. They have a ton of connections out there, and so it certainly is not going to preclude them from dipping their toes into those waters.
As a Big Ten guy myself, I love it. Now, the other opportunity foregone by the Steelers in standing pat at 21 and picking Harmon is this idea of a trade down, because as we know, the DK Metcalf trade left the Steelers without a round 2 pick. So they're sitting there on day 2 Friday with 1 pick at 83 and with a ton of talent between 33 and 100. And we've talked about the depth of this draft. And we know that the Steelers were listening to some offers. Any idea what they forgone? And we knew there were some guys with a star by their name that they were not going to trade away from. And clearly Harmon was way up there at the top of that star list. But any idea, just give us a flavor of what they could have gotten if they did want to move down?
Yeah, I mean, they could have gotten some draft capital there from the Bills. The Bills are trying to come up to 21 at some point, but actually what foiled that deal from the start was the Broncos taking Jahdae Barron at 20. That was a surprise pick there for the Broncos. The Broncos didn't expect Jahdae Barron to be there, so they took him. The Bills really wanted Jahdae Barron and were going to try and come up to get him. Obviously, without him there, I think they backed off of it. They ended up with Maxwell Hairston, I believe. So they've ended up with the corner themselves, but they did want to come up for a corner pretty consistently. That was a big time call. Once most of those top linemen popped off the board, the Texans backed off of their pursuit of a trade. There were some teams that wanted to pop up from the second round. That was something that the Steelers had inquired about. They did receive a call from the Atlanta Falcons, but they didn't want to go back that far. That never really materialized the things. And the Falcons wanted to kind of go further back into the first round. They ended up trading up to 26 and the Rams got a future first. But from what I know, that offer was never on the table for Pittsburgh. It was a call and nothing more other than that. The Giants did call them, about trading up for Jackson Dart. That was the one, but they never offered their top of the third round pick. That was the thing. The Steelers could not have gotten 34 and 65. That's what it would have taken to probably get up there for Pittsburgh to pull the trigger on that move. They never got that offer. The Giants, I believe, offered 99 to them instead, and the Steelers said that's just not worth it going back 13 spots. Of course, they had Harmon start as well. But from what I heard, basically, this market was not that lush. There were a lot more teams that tried to trade up in a depressed market that weren't offering nearly as much because of what we talked about, John, the fact that there wasn't blue chip prospects viewed in that range, a lot of teams were kind of offering depressed trade up values. And so the Steelers wouldn't have gotten a ton of compensation for it. And so once they saw Harmon was on the board, they said, this is not a player we're going to trade back from. Certainly not 13 spots to trade back from. And so that is essentially the thought process for them. But they didn't have a lot of appealing offers. Now, if they wanted to get out of there, they could have. They could have taken that Giants deal. They could have taken a short trade back potentially. But I look at what the offers that were on the table and what they were actually being discussed with. For example, if that Falcons offer had come and they had gotten 46, a future first round pick, I mean, I'm sure they would have thought about that, but that offer never came through because it would have cost even more than the Falcons paid the Rams. So it really did kind of leave the Steelers in a spot where, man, we have Derrick Harmon, he's got a star next to his name, and these offers aren't really that great. So the trade back scenario never really came to fruition.
Great info there as well, just to show what was going on behind the scenes. Now, one team that did make a blockbuster deal was the Cleveland Browns. They now hold 2 first-round picks in 2026, when Steelers fans will be able to boo the Brownies twice in the first round. So we have that to look forward to. And, of course, they gave the Jacksonville Jags the opportunity to come up and take Travis Hunter, and they slid back and took the Michigan defensive tackle. But you kind of knocked that deal. You kind of think the Browns blew it. Give us your take on that whole transaction.
Here's the thing for me. I'm just not one to trade away from a talent like Travis Hunter. Now, I understand. I mean, the Browns got fantastic value for that. And this is the ramifications of the Deshaun Watson trade. Just kind of building up, right? Getting themselves more capital. They have so many holes on the roster. They need more and more picks. They're gearing up for a better quarterback class last year, just like the Rams, by the way, gearing up for quarterbacks next year. This all has kind of come to fruition. And the Steelers in particular here, if I were the Steelers, for example, with 2, and I would have had Travis Hunter there, I'm not going away from him. The Browns in particular, I don't think should have done it either, because even though they have this incredible haul of picks, and it's a really nice thing to have, but man, you're passing on a player I consider generational. I hate that tag, generational player. This guy is actually one of those. Like, he is actually generational. He's a great receiver, great corner. This is a great fit for him in Jacksonville with Liam Cohn, with Trevor Lawrence sprinkling in some at corner. This is about as good of a fit for Travis Hunter as he could have gotten. The Jaguars are making a big time swing with that move. For me, though, it's just, I look at the Browns and I'm like, you traded away from that type of talent, and you needed so much talent. You had 4 top 100 picks. It's not like they were starving for picks. You got an extra 1 next year, and sure, that flexibility can help. But man, I just hate personally trading away from players like Travis Hunter. I just do. And so Travis Hunter to me is just such a special player, and that is exactly why I wouldn't have traded away from him. It's the type of player you got. Now listen, I do like Mason Graham. Mason Graham's a nice player. He's not too much better to me than Harmon and Grant and Nolan. I don't think that tiers that much separate. There's not that much separation there. I think it's a fine pick. From what I've heard, that pick was actually very much influenced and handpicked by Myles Garrett. Potentially that being a significant thing. Their $40 million edge rusher that requested a trade and then said, oh no, I'm not actually going to request a trade. Probably had some bearing on that, but I can't fathom trading away from a player like Travis Hunter. That's just me. Best player in the class, one of those generational type of players to me that come along once every so often. I just would have taken him. That's my take on it.
And that's a good take. And I'll tell you, based on Travis Hunter's jubilant reaction, nobody has ever been any happier not to go to the mistake by the lake. He is headed to Duval County instead, and he seems very happy about it. Now, how about those Ravens? They always seem to draft so well, and I hate it. What's your take about Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, at pick 27?
Yeah, that guy's really good. Physical player, can man up in the slot. He can be a type of guy that really allows them to put Kyle Hamilton back in the deep safety area to become that true ball hawk type. Man, Kyle Hamilton's such a dynamic player around the line of scrimmage in the slot, but when you put him deep, he's an eraser. So you can do a lot of different things there. Starks is a really fun player. This is the type of player that when you watch him play, you just say, "Oh, that's a Baltimore Raven." I feel like that's the thing. He because he's also a Baltimore Raven. I mean, I also looked at him and said, "Man, that guy looks like a Pittsburgh Steeler." Right? Malachi Starks is that type of player. He's a physical player. He's a smart player. I think that's the biggest thing. We're talking about cerebral players. That's Malachi Starks. He's a very smart player. So you can play him in the slot. You can play him at strong safety. I'm assuming they're going to probably play him a little bit more in the slot this year since they have Darius Washington there for this year, but he's a free agent after this year. So no certain terms there for them. But I just love Malachi Starks. Polished player, really high floor. He's going to be a really solid player. So this is the type of building block you have when you are a team like the Ravens. He just plays like a Baltimore Raven, man. Just a really good old football player. That's what I would say about Malachi Starks. Good pick by the Ravens. It's that type of player that you really have. So, yeah, I'm a big-time fan of Malachi Starks in this fit.
Hate to say it, folks. The Ravens defense just got better, and so might have the Bengals. They got themselves an edge rusher to go after Lamar Jackson and all those great QBs in the AFC. So was Shamir Stewart out of Texas A&M the right move at pick 17?
Shamar Stewart's going to be the biggest boomer bust player in this draft. He could be a superstar or he could be a complete bust. He has incredible upside in terms of actual physical traits, not just athleticism, but measurements. The length he has, it's incredible. He is an elite athlete. He has elite physical tools. Perhaps the best physical tools, Son Abdul Carter, in the entire class. He has absolutely incredible tools. So that's the first part. This guy's got incredible projection. Well, here's the issue: the production, right? The production isn't there. He averaged 1.5 sacks per season. But you actually watch the tape. He's got great speed and bend, and he can actually win. He just hasn't been able to finish. And so that's the key. It's actually bringing down the quarterback. Important part of the play. You can win and beat the tackle, but you actually have to tackle the quarterback. That is the biggest thing with this. It's kind of like, Keanu Benton in some ways when I watch him, because I watch Keanu Benton's tape every year, even back to Wisconsin, and I say, man, this guy wins so often. He's at the quarterback, and then he just comes close and misses. How many times do you watch games? Keanu Benton's right there, and then the guy just slips through his fingers. It happens too often. And that's kind of Shamar Stewart's issue. But he's an edge rusher. And so that is the thing. He's going to have to finish. If he can learn to finish, it's a tackling technique thing. He ducks his head. He kind of nips at ankles for how big he is. He needs to be better there, but he gives them a lot of really cool versatility because he can play down to the 5 in certain packages when you really try to condense sets and things like that. He's a perfect modern edge rusher in that regard. So he'll fit in there well. It's going to be how much can he polish up his consistency down and down? Can he finish his pass rushes? Because this is a guy I think that has so much upside for them. So we'll see. Either he's going to be a miraculous bust or this guy is going to be a superstar. I'm not sure. There's a higher variance player in terms of where they picked him than Shamar Stewart. Physically gifted, like few are in this class. It has a lot of work to do.
Okay. Now, the other subtext that a lot of people are reading into the Steelers' moves, in other words, a QB needing team with just 2 QBs on the roster, passing on a QB in the first round and not holding a pick on day 2 until way down at 83, is they got some kind of signal from Aaron Rodgers that he is going to be their starter for the coming season. And there's this talk about a deadline, and maybe there was a phone conversation where he sort of said, hey, I'm coming. Is there any idea? Do you read anything into the fact of the way the first round broke down with not going with a quarterback and not really having any ammo to make much noise on day 2, that Aaron Rodgers is in the cards for the Steelers in 2025?
I do believe he will sign. Listen, I had a source tell me this week that they would be very surprised if Aaron Rodgers retired. Very surprised. From discussions the Steelers have had with him, he's been consistently engaged with the Steelers throughout his time. So he has consistently talked with them, kept them up to date. It's not like he's gone dark. The Steelers are very much in the loop of everything. They were not surprised by anything that came out on the Pat McAfee show last week. He had told them everything about that. So he was upfront and honest with them, and he has told them, it seems like, I don't know if he's told them explicitly this, but I do know that it seems like via the discussions they're having, he's planning on playing. And so the Steelers seem to be quite confident they're going to land Aaron Rodgers. Now, is that going to happen by OTAs or minicamp? I don't know. It could happen right before training camp. That's kind of the deadline for this is he's going to have to give him an answer by training camp. There's no question about that. But it's very possible that he doesn't sign until a week before training camp. So this could take a long time, but it does certainly sound like they believe they are going to land Aaron Rodgers. I would predict Aaron Rodgers to be their quarterback one this year. Doesn't mean they're not going to draft a quarterback this year. We talked about that. I think they are going to look at mid-round quarterbacks this year. If Tyler Shuck potentially falls at the third round, that could be an option for them if he's there. Will Howard is there. I think he's an option. Kyle McCord is another player to keep an eye on. So there's some mid-round quarterbacks to look at. But yes, I think passing on Shedeur Sanders is at least a preliminary sign. They look at this and say, I believe Aaron Rodgers is going to be the Steelers' quarterback, and I firmly do believe that. So I do think he is going to sign with them at some point between now and the training camp. Whenever that might be, John, who knows? But I do believe at some point we will find out that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the Steelers' quarterback this year.
We have that to look forward to and to discuss at length. Looking ahead immediately, we have day 2, Friday, the second and third rounds coming up. And to me, it just shapes up as Steelers fans sitting around watching a lot of all the other teams take a lot of good football players while the Steelers are waiting at 83. Is there any chance the Steelers try to make any kind of noise on day 2? Or do they wait to see what is available at pick 83?
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning towards them just sticking there right now and kind of seeing what comes to them. Here's the thing. The Steelers very much are going to sit there and kind of play the board. I don't think they have the picks to move up. They have too many needs to try and move up. Now, the one way they get back in, as we've talked about many times before, is trading George Pickens. We'll see. I don't expect that to happen, as I've said before, but if it does come to fruition, if they get some type of offer that knocks their socks off, that would be the one way to do it. But my guess right now is they're going to sit at 83. And my guess is this pick is probably going to be a quarterback or a running back. That's my guess. I think they will go to the offensive side of the ball here. I think it's going to either be, Shuck Howard, someone like Dylan Sampson, or DJ Giddens. That's probably the 4 players I would throw in there. There's an outside chance, they take someone like a corner or a receiver if they fall. But I think, quarterback, running back would be the 2 positions to watch tonight for them. And then we'll see kind of how things go from there into day 3. But Pittsburgh right now, I'm expecting to kind of sit there at 83 and not make a drastic move. Maybe they would trade back from 83. I don't think that's a crazy thought, that they would trade back and try to pick up an extra 4th. They did that before when they selected Darnell Washington. They traded back, I think, 12 or 13 spots, picked up an extra 4th, turned that into Nick Herbig. They don't have a 4th. They have 1 4th-round pick right now. Could they maybe get an extra one? We'll see. So I wouldn't be surprised if they trade back from 83 and didn't love their options there. So that could certainly happen for them too. But I think they're probably going to stick at 83 and take a quarterback or a running back today.
Okay. That's something to watch for. And obviously, we have no idea how the draft board is going to unfold from here. But in your analysis, all your pre-draft work that you've done, any quintessential Steelers guys that you see out there that we might see those names come up when the Steelers draft card comes in the successive rounds? Just give us some guys to watch and maybe root for that they fall to when the Steelers are picking throughout the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think in round 3, I think you look at Dylan Sampson, and he's very Steelersy in a lot of ways. A lot of Jaylen Warren there, but he's fast. He's a home run hitter. He's really good in between the tackles. He makes sense for them in round 3. Austin Wally, the cornerback from Minnesota, very Steelersy player, physical. He can play inside or outside. All production through the roof. He was a captain for 2 years. He had 37 pass deflections over his career with the Golden Gophers. That is a fun player. He fits what they like. Wally's probably a 5th or a 6th round pick, somewhere in there. So if the Steelers want to draft their slot corner, that's the guy to keep an eye on. Don't discount a double dip at defensive line. It could certainly happen. They drafted Derrick Harmon here. They could go back into the late rounds and try and get a nose tackle now. I think that is something to watch. So guys like J.J. Pegues, guys like Jamari Caldwell, and Yaya Black. Those 3 guys are names to watch. Black, I had mocked in my final mock draft, him in the 6th round. He could be a name to watch. Instant run defender. Again, if they want to improve their run defense, that's the type of player you would look at. In terms of the safety position, Dan Jackson and Craig Woodson are the 2 names to watch. Dan Jackson didn't get invited to the Combine. He'll be one of the top non-Combine invites drafted. Really good athlete. strong safety, can man up in the slot if you need him to. Woodson was coached by Steelers defensive backs coach Jared Alexander at Cal. He was recruited by him, so there's a connection there for the Steelers and Woodson. As we talked about with the West Coast guys, Cal is now in the ACC, so the Steelers were able to see him even in Pittsburgh because they played in Pittsburgh this year. That's a name to watch. If they wait a little bit later to running back, if they wait about to the 4th or the 5th round, Bashal Tootin is a name that I've connected to them fairly consistently. His cousin's Isaac Redman, by the way. How about that one? Isn't that a little crazy? Isaac Redman is a completely different player, though, than Tootin. Tootin's a wide zone home run hitter, not a red zone bruiser. So I think Tootin's a name to watch at running back. Wide receiver, Dante Thornton is a name to watch from Tennessee, and Jimmy Horn Jr. from Colorado. But Thornton's the real name to watch here in the 5th round. A lot of Martavis Bryant in his game. He is a height, weight, speed monster with high upside, very raw. But in the 5th round, you take a chance on guys with physical tools like that. So that's just a few names to point out. There's a lot of names that make sense for the Steelers, but those are some targets I think that they'll look at.
Nice, Nick. Some names to look for as the weekend proceeds. And of course, to Derrick Harmon, we say congratulations. Welcome to the Berg. And we send Godspeed to your beloved mother and plenty of Pittsburgh prayers. And for everyone else, we will be back on Tuesday as we will have the full draft class and all those unrestricted, undrafted players that the Steelers are going to try to sign. And we're going to break down as this 2025 starts taking final form. So there's a lot more that we're going to talk about on the regular show on Tuesday. So come back with us. But everybody else, enjoy the draft. Steelers, go out and get those playmakers, and we'll see you on Tuesday.